Josh, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us once again. As you know, the Philanthropy Roundtable is holding a donor event on June 1st and 2nd, Upskilling for Economic Mobility. And at that event, we're going to be looking at leading community college strategies. Who's doing good work to help people get the skills they need for the jobs they want? Now, in the course of planning this, your Aspen Prize for Community College Excellence was just absolutely instrumental in helping to connect me with some really outstanding schools. Can you tell us a little bit about the prize, why it was started and how it's going?
Sure. So the Aspen Prize for Community College Excellence was initiated in 2010. And I think there were really three core ideas. One is that we don't use the term excellence and community college together often enough. It's a sector of 1,200 schools serving over 40% of undergraduates in our country. And yet we were not adequately distinguishing those schools that were achieving excellent outcomes for students from those that were not, and providing the kind of skills that you're interested in highlighting. And so the question then was, how do we move that forward and how can we add value to work that others are doing as well? And the idea of the prize was really meant to serve three functions. One is to elevate the sector, to start to use the term excellence in the context of community colleges when it's deserved, and to really elevate the sector overall through that. Community colleges are not, were not at the time, and I would argue still aren't, adequately recognized for the important role they play in American higher education, economic development, social mobility, et cetera. The second goal was to define excellence. You know, community colleges have come to do a dozen different things.
A lot of different things, yes.
Exactly. So they are the first 2 years of undergraduate education. They do degrees in workforce training. They do contract workforce training. They are the providers of ESL, English as a second language instruction. They do developmental education, GED. I can go on. Adult education.
I know, it was very confusing at first.
Exactly.
This remedial ed, developmental ed. How do you sort through that landscape?
And so in that context, we really haven't, because they have become so many things, we haven't defined what excellence means. And when you haven't created a definition, it's very hard to then measure against. And so the second goal really was to try to bring a group of people together to define excellence in the sector. And then finally, excuse me, perhaps most importantly, is replicating effective practice. So against the definition, finding institutions through deep research that are achieving excellent outcomes for students in learning, completion, labor market, and equitable outcomes. Those are that's our four-part definition of excellence. How do they do it? How do we help others understand what it takes, not just to move a few students forward in a specialized program, not just to move one program of study forward, but the entire institution?
It's such an important area that you're getting into, because when you think about colleges, the four-year colleges, we all know the Ivy Leagues and you know, which are the absolute top schools that do this or whatever. But as you're pointing out, there's no equivalent for community college. It's just this big morass. So it is very exciting that you're doing that and grappling with all of the conflicting missions and the many different things that they do. But to your latter point about how do you replicate things that are going on, tell me about some examples. What are some schools that, what are some of the schools doing that you're really excited about? And you know, it's no coincidence, of course, we're going to have several of the schools represented at our event. Valencia, Miami-Dade, for example. What makes them different? So we've got this big pile and you're trying to point out excellence. In terms of excellence, what are some of the give us like specific examples of things that you can be excited about that separates them from the 1,200 other schools?
Yeah, so there are really three things that are defining these exceptional colleges. I think the first is that they're all changing the value proposition for students. So fundamentally what they're doing is they're not just thinking about the cost side, getting students through efficiently, they're also thinking about the value side. And Valencia is a terrific example of that, where Valencia created a guaranteed admission process with the University of Central Florida. It exists for a few other schools as well, community colleges with UCF, but Valencia really helped invent this. And students know that if they get an associate's degree with a C average, basically if you can get your associate's degree, you're guaranteed admission to the University of Central Florida. And there are thousands of students making that migration now. And so if you ask yourself the question, what does that change? In the minds of students, it means, I can get a bachelor's degree for a lower cost from a selective, very selective institution now, a school that I either couldn't get into as a freshman or perhaps couldn't afford as a freshman.
Or might even be intimidated to even try.
And in the first 2 years, I can have smaller classes in a place with terrific, terrific teaching and learning academy where professors are really trained to do good teaching. And so the value proposition changed for students. And when students see lots and lots of students going through and getting something of real value, what happens at the college can be better organized, but whether it is or isn't, they're likely to achieve it. So I would say Valencia is a terrific example of changing the value proposition, among other things. The second idea is you've got to make the pathway through the college much more efficient. And Valencia has done strong work on that in that way. Miami-Dade in recent years has worked very, very hard to create clear pathways for students all the way from entry through progression all the way to completion. And what that requires is working closely with professors to make sure that students don't follow what some recent authors, Tom Bailey, Davis Jenkins, Shauna Jaggers, refer to as the cafeteria approach. We're going to give you a catalog, hope you and your advisors can figure it out. By the way, advisors may have a caseload of 500 to 1,000 students. And
maybe it'll lead somewhere.
And maybe it'll lead somewhere. And look, everybody wants students to succeed, but what had grown up, which was a very unstructured approach, made it very hard for students and their advisors to understand, and made it hard to monitor student progression all the way through. So Miami-Dade has done terrific work in creating these guided pathways and building an advising structure around it. The last thing that needs to happen is you've got to get deeply into the classroom. Really work with professors to ensure rigorous and strong teaching, rigorous standards and strong teaching. And this is something that I think we don't value enough in our national conversation.
Or don't expect from community colleges.
Well, I think that's right. I think students expect it. I think there are a lot of professors doing it. You can go to any community college in our country and find professors who are holding standards high. The question is, how do you organize a college so that all professors are holding standards high and are trained in the best pedagogical techniques? And that's something that West Kentucky Community and Technical College has done remarkable work on. Valencia has done very strong work on that.
Creating a whole culture of excellence.
That's exactly right. But in the classroom, we neglect that. So again, I think what these colleges, Valencia, Miami-Dade, and West Kentucky stand for is a strong value proposition, clear pathways through the institution that are guided, and very strong engagement with faculty in teaching and learning.
I think that pathways part can't be underestimated. When you think about the types of students who come into community colleges, how many are first in family to go to college, low income, whatever, they don't necessarily have the knowledge to make informed decisions. Not that it's readily available anyway, but still, it's not as if you have a family behind you necessarily that can help you navigate that process. So it's even more important in these places.
That's right, and I think we need to understand also that you've got some fundamental choices in community colleges to make that are different from four-year schools that actually make the degree of difficulty harder. So you've got students who are less likely to be prepared or have the social capital to understand how to move through or find in their families to figure out how to navigate the system. And you've got more difficult decisions. So what are those decisions? Well, am I going to go into career and technical education? Does it make sense for me to think about an advanced manufacturing credential in it, or something that's pre-philosophy or pre-med or pre-law? Those are decisions that by and large, if you go to your four-year university, you don't have to decide. The second important decision you've got to make, that you've got to navigate, is the four-year college you may go to may have very different requirements. And so you've got to make a whole bunch of decisions about the first 2 years. If you were at a four-year school, everything's going to count. They're going to take all the credits from the freshman and sophomore year into the junior and senior year at the same school. If you're transferring, which to get a bachelor's degree by and large you have to, you better take the right courses. So the degree of difficulty is higher, and the challenges students come in with are higher as well. And so clear pathways is a great way of starting to organize things in ways to meet both of those challenges.
Right, and in many ways, these are the students who can least afford to make costly mistakes, either in time or money. So that's
exactly right.
Yes, why one of the reasons I'm really excited about learning about guided pathways. So just last week, Aspen Institute launched its inaugural class of leadership fellows, and of course I looked at the list and I was delighted to see that one of our speakers is on your list, and that's Marcia Ballinger from Lorain County Community College in Ohio. Tell me about this prize in terms of leadership. Why is leadership so important that you wanted to roll out a prize specifically devoted to this?
Sure. Well, this won't come to as a surprise to anybody who's done any education philanthropy or worked in an education system, which is you don't have a great college without a great president. In the same way you don't have a great K-12 school without a great principal. And this has been said so often that it's become almost
a mantra.
A mantra or a throat clearing exercise. Yeah, we know that.
We all know it.
Well, if we know that, what are we doing about it? The question becomes, we've got a huge number of retiring presidents. I just heard Walter Bumpus, president of AACC, say that there are 1,123 community colleges in the country. We've seen over 1,123 transitions in presidents in the last 5 years.
Wow.
That means that multiple presidencies in
some schools,
some colleges, and turnover in the majority of colleges. What that means is that we are at a moment, we've got baby boomers retiring, we are at a moment where we really can rethink the college presidency. And if the challenge is more degrees for a more diverse population at a lower per pupil cost in a shorter period of time, which really is the challenge.
Faster, better, more.
Leaders are going to have to know how to do that. And so I think we've got a great opportunity to rethink the hiring process.
Yes.
And so we're engaged with some boards, and we released some hiring tools to align the hiring process with student success-oriented leaders.
And just creating a cohort of people who are striving for excellence is huge.
That's exactly right. And we've got to train them. And so our new fellowship with Stanford University is about 40 leaders every year coming through who we believe can transform institutions and lead to much higher student outcomes. And so, the average community college is 12 or 13,000 students. When this class of 40 become presidents, that's 500,000 students every year whose lives will be changed. So we are delighted with the group, including Marcia and several folks. It's a very diverse group.
Yeah. It should be for this challenge.
Well, we're leaving way too much talent on the table.
Right.
So it's a terrific group, and we're really excited to be working with Stanford and working with these exceptional folks.
We look forward to seeing how that goes. It's always fun to have a first year and learn a lot of things. Well, you've shared a lot of different considerations that certainly I've been learning a great deal about from you, from your prizes and other things. As a last question, let me ask, what can donors do? What role can philanthropy play in really driving community college excellence?
Yeah, Joe, as you know, I spent 8 years in philanthropy, and I think about that every day, which is where can we have the greatest impact? And I think philanthropy plays a really important role. And I would argue for community colleges has much greater opportunity than in other educational sectors. Community colleges are often underfunded as compared to other sectors of higher ed.
States pulling out.
Funding out, that's right. And so I think that the ability to leverage dollars towards great gains is tremendous in the community college sector. So first I would suggest that people take a close look at that. To me, there are three things to really think about as a funder. The first would be leadership. There are only 5,000 college presidents in the country. There are only 1,200 community college presidents.
And the worlds don't meet, right? They're two separate worlds,
That's right. They are. So the 1,200 community college presidents, as I like to say, I can count to 1,200. There are 7 to 11 million students in community college. And so one question is, can you have an influence on the leadership in your local community? Can you have them use the Aspen hiring tools? Can you work with them on a leadership academy in the local community or in the state to try to think about how are we going to train the leaders to do the work? Very high leverage strategy. I think there's a huge opportunity there. Because remember, if you're in a community, even in a large city, you're talking about 4 or 5 community colleges. If you can have an impact on that group, you can make a big difference. So I would think a lot about the hiring and professional development of leaders. Secondly, the majority of community college students go to transfer or want to transfer to a 4-year school. And any opportunity you have to provide transfer scholarships or fund bringing together 2- and 4-year schools to create clear pathways from the 2- to the 4-year school, I think has huge promise. I would encourage folks to think about an ecosystem of education from the high school through to the community college to the four-year school.
That overused word pathways, right? But it really is appropriate.
That's right. And you can look at the Pathway to the Baccalaureate program at Northern Virginia Community College. 10,000 students strong, going from Fairfax and Loudoun County schools through Northern Virginia Community College to George Mason. It's a terrific example of something that can be accomplished with schools committed to making this work. The results are phenomenal for all students that participate in, but it's mostly low-income, first-generation students. And then the last thing I would say is ask the right questions of community colleges as you're working with them. How are you defining success? Is it about enrollment, or have you moved to completion? Is it about completion, or is it about completion so that you can transfer and get a bachelor's or get a good job with a family-sustaining wage? And so in light of that, I think there's great opportunity for scholarships in advanced manufacturing, information technology, energy, allied health. These are the fields that community colleges struggle to fund the equipment for.
Right,
and
very
that students,
expensive.
and they actually, so we think about community colleges being inexpensive, but some of the tuition for some of these programs is $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $10,000 a year because the equipment's so expensive. And so I do think if you're in the scholarship world, think about funding scholarships for students who are in these high-value programs that may be a little more expensive, but yield $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year jobs.
Right.
And we've got
Coming
shortages
right out of the
nationally.
gate. Yes.
So, so to me, those are the places where I think there's great leverage. I think there's work that can be done locally, at the state level, and nationally. And so no matter where you are in the world of philanthropy, no matter what the size of your endowment and the size of your giving, I think that there's work that can be done with community colleges that can make a big difference.
And I think to your earlier point, if your philanthropy relates to higher education, workforce development, economic mobility, poverty, the range is huge. And you know, there's a knee-jerk reaction in America to fund your alma mater, and I'd like to hopefully have people think a little bit broader about that and look at their local community college as well.
Well, we all want to be true to our school,
right?
As the Beach Boys once said. But I think the question, you know, community colleges are a great place to do equity work. And whether one believes that that impetus should come from the private sector or government, community colleges are responsive to the private sector in the best of all worlds. Look, they've got to get better, but they're responsive to workforce needs in ways that the rest of higher education sometimes isn't. I just think there's an enormous opportunity.
There is, and it's exciting to see what a development of a marketplace of community colleges. So thank you very much, Josh. Your prize is just pointing out a lot of different things that I didn't know. I'm guessing a lot of our donors didn't know. I really appreciate you shining a spotlight on excellence and sharing that with us all.
Well, thank you for your interest and the time together.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.